Welcome to Drugs and Stuff, a podcast from the Drug Policy Alliance. And now your hosts, Tommy McDonald and Derek Rosenfeld.
So welcome back into Drugs and Stuff. We're here at Reform 17, and we're happy to be joined by Jon Perri. How are you?
I'm good.
So how are you enjoying the conference so far? Tell us about your experience here.
It's really great. Michelle Alexander, definitely the highlight so far. She's really wonderful, and it was really great to finally see her speak. I read the book, and have never gotten a chance to see her speak yet, so that was great.
So tell us what you're up to these days. What are you working on?
So I am at change.org. I'm a director of campaigns and partnerships there. So we're an online petition platform. I work primarily on our criminal justice reform work, helping people tell their stories, launch campaigns for either state-based reforms or federal legislation. And we did a lot of work around clemency. So I'm here at DPA with a project that kind of came out of some of that work called Nation of Second Chances. And this is a photo and video journalism series that I've launched, which is telling the stories of people who were granted clemency by President Obama. So mostly nonviolent drug offenders who received very long sentences and are only free now because President Obama commuted their sentences.
And where can people check that out?
Nationofsecondchances.org is our site, and we're on Instagram and Facebook as well, just Nation of Second Chances. It's pretty photo heavy, so you can check out Instagram is a really great place to follow us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you find, visual campaigns like that having a larger degree of success, just given, the state of the way people consume media now?
Yeah, I think so. I partnered with a couple of photographers, and I'm learning photography myself for this. It's a lot of portrait and street style stuff. So we have some really powerful photos that go along with these stories. And how it works is I'll spend a day with some of these recipients, ask them a lot of questions, and walk around and shoot some really beautiful photos. We edit those and take their interview and turn that into a bit of like an essay that sort of talks about how they ended up getting involved in drugs, how they ended up getting a sentence, what it was like to be in prison, what it was like to get clemency from President Obama, how that happened, if there were lawyers that helped them out or if they did it themselves. A lot of people filed their own clemency petitions, which is really, really powerful. And then, I think the most important thing for me is just following up and talking about what they're doing now and what this second chance is. And I think when we have these really powerful photos to go along with that, it sort of humanizes these folks a bit more than you would if you were just reading about them in the news or something.
So tell us about, one of the folks that you featured. Tell us one of the more compelling stories that you were able to unearth and highlight. Are there any individual ones that pop out at you as particularly compelling?
Yeah. Josephine Ledesma, who I was just got to meet a couple of weekends ago, did almost 25 years of a life sentence, first-time offender. And Jason Hernandez, who is here, is also one of President Obama's first clemency recipients, and is here at the Drug Policy Alliance conference speaking. Jason actually filed her clemency petition for her. So he got her clemency. Her case is particularly egregious. She really didn't do much of anything other than knew about some drug dealing that was happening, and I believe delivered an envelope of money at some point or something along those lines, and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. And this is the sweetest, kindest, nicest woman I think I've ever met. And so spent a whole day with her, and the idea that someone like her was in prison for so long, for 25 years, and who would die in prison if the president hadn't intervened in her case, which is such a remarkable thing, too, when you think about it, that the president of the United States is going to intervene in someone's individual case. Josephine, when you meet her, she's a grandmother. She's about to turn 60 years old, spent more than half of her life in prison at this point. And yet, when you actually get to see what this person looks like and hear about her experience, I think it's going to change people's minds about who these people actually are.
I think this project is so important, what you're doing, Jon. We get caught up a lot in the drug policy reform movement around statistics because, we think that those are egregious. We've spent, billions of dollars every year. There's 1.5 million arrests a year, all these people. But then you just hear a couple examples of personal stories like what you're sharing right now, and it really illustrates it in such a different way. And that's what I think really is a much more important way and a better job of changing hearts and minds. Because you hear about, your installation is alongside our colleague Tony Papa's art installation, who, he received clemency from Governor Pataki. And most people don't know, Obama, he did more clemencies than any other president, more than like the last 10 or 12
1,700 or so people.
And then again, you think about how the overwhelming majority of people who are serving time for drug offenses are in state prisons, and how this clemency responsibility is really on the hands of all the 50 governors. And you just don't hear about it nearly as much as, what Obama was able to do. And I think your stories are just really, really great. And I think it'll help shine a light on how much more this can help people potentially.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That's ultimately, I think, the main goal here is, one, to educate people about the power of clemency that both the president has, which is a huge responsibility, and something that I don't know what is going to happen under Trump, right? I mean, partly, inspired this project was, while President Obama was giving these commutations, Trump was saying things like, everybody should have trouble sleeping at night knowing that these people are going to be free. And these are, like I just said, these are 60-year-old grandmothers. They're people who have been in prison for 25 years under laws that have been changed, right? They just weren't applied retroactively to these people. Right. So even Congress bipartisanly agreed we shouldn't be having this sentencing disparity, at least as severe as it was. But we said to the people who are in prison under those laws, you have to remain there unless the president intervenes or you serve out your sentence, right? And so my hope is that, to an extent, we can change both Trump supporters' minds, maybe even Trump's mind, about using his clemency power here. It was really frustrating to see the pardon for Joe Arpaio, given that he hadn't even been convicted for like a few months, and
didn't serve a day either. Yeah.
And you've got people who are rotting away in prison, who could use the mercy from the president, because Congress probably isn't going to let them out.
Listening to Jon Perri from change.org on drugs and stuff. Thanks for coming to sit in with us. Jon, talk about, what we're talking about is storytelling here. Talk about the value of humanizing people, putting a human face on a complex human issue, because, hearing you tell Josephine's story, the average person on the outside looking in is going to see that, this old lady's dealing drugs, but what you're doing is actually humanizing her and giving her a face, giving her a soul, and giving her breath and life, and allowing the receiver of that message to empathize and, say, hey, I that's my grandmother. That's my neighbor. And, can cause people to look at something in a way that they ordinarily wouldn't look at it. Talk about the value of humanizing, complex social issues.
Yeah, so I would point back to some of the work that we do at change.org and that we did over the last couple of years there around clemency for drug offenders. So once the Clemency Project and initiative was announced for President Obama, I kind of realized that this would be a great way for families to start individual change.org petitions and tell their stories that way. And what we found was that when you had like the daughter of someone who was in prison, or the parent of someone who was in prison, or the brother or sister start those petitions and tell their stories, and talk about how they were affected, rather than it coming from just another drug policy organization or an individual who works for one of those organizations, but coming directly from the people who were impacted and telling their stories, we were getting hundreds of thousands of people signing these petitions, and it became a place where where family members finally found this way to tell stories and find support. These are people who have had difficulty talking about the fact that their mom or dad is in prison their whole lives. And it's never been an easy way to find some support. And they came to our platform, they'd start a petition, and 30,000 people would sign it and say, I agree with you. And so, the value of a petition is always debatable sometimes, but they gave these people a whole lot of hope. And actually, we ended up having about 150 petitions, all started by people who have someone in prison, with about 2.5 million signatures across all of them, which is really significant. And about 24 people who received clemency from President Obama actually had a change.org petition. which is really neat. And a lot of those lawyers would use those change.org petitions in the clemency packets when they actually applied, just to demonstrate that there was this support. So my project kind of comes out of that, in the sense that I want to keep that tradition of helping these people tell their own stories. So it's not me writing this story about what happened to them, but it's in their words and have photos that go along with it. So it's them talking directly about what happened, rather than folks hearing about it from an organization or something like that. And I think that makes a huge difference for people.
So I want to change gears for a quick second here. You know, John and I, we're both Phish fans. If folks who are devoted to drugs and stuff, John sounds so disappointed. The intro episode, I think Tommy wasted no more than about a minute and a half before bringing that up for folks. And I've had a little bit of an interesting, evolution in my relationship with this band. But, and I was going to make a joke when you first sat down and you talked about reading Michelle's book. You're like, I read the book. I was going to say the Helping Friendly book.
Read the book.
Read the fucking book. Tommy's just sitting here looking out the window like, what are these guys talking about?
No, I just love that you're like endlessly jamming as you talk about a jam band. Keep riffing, my friend. Dorian all the way.
Noodling. Keep noodling.
What I was thinking about is, so we're two white guys who work in a criminal justice space and go to a band where, 99% of the audience is white. Sure. Our friends at Headcount, actually, were you used to work at Headcount? John's been around. He's a former SSDPer. Yeah. Former Headcount volunteer?
So team leader, and did some other work with them. Yeah.
Shout out to our friends and family at Headcount.
Yes, they are wonderful.
And they actually just wrote a very thought-provoking blog about this after Phish just finished their residency doing the Baker's Dozen in New York. And this is something that was a conversation happening at the MAPS conference I was at earlier this year. The overwhelming whiteness of the content and the participation, the audience there. And ironically, this is just something I was thinking about. Mayor de Blasio was giving the Drug Policy Alliance a hard time for a report we put out over the summer about the continuation of racial disparities in marijuana arrests in New York. And he was trying to say, like, oh, well, we used to arrest so many more people, and now it's only like 18,000 people. And it's just like, number one, like we pointed out, almost like 9 out of 10 people are black or Latino, just like there was before. But not only that, 18,000 people fit inside of Madison Square Garden. Yeah. And maybe half or almost all of them were smoking weed that night, and doing so with complete immunity. I mean, it's like a free-for-all in there. And there's just, it had a real hard time sitting with me, while at the same time going to a concert like this, seeing something like that, and then hearing Mayor de Blasio give us a hard time about, he's trying to say, oh, we're doing better than we used to be. Let's talk about this, because the drug policy reform movement has talked about this issue before. The representation in the industry. I mean, race is such a core part of the history of drug laws, the way they were, first implemented and how they continue to be enforced. Phish fans should have a little bit of an understanding of what it looks like inside there. I mean, doing drugs, not just marijuana, with complete immunity. It's a mixed bag, this conversation, but there's a lot there.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I think it extends, certainly beyond that band and jam bands in general. And you can look at just sort of large-scale party events. I mean, you look at EDM festivals or something like that, where there's also widespread, drug use going on. And for the most part, there's a blind eye turned to that by law enforcement. I'm not quite sure why that is. I mean, maybe it's just because you're having so many people together. Maybe it's because they're primarily white people. People are still getting arrested at these events. That's the other thing we shouldn't totally ignore. I mean, of course, you're getting the vast majority of people are being allowed to do what they do, right, in there. But there's still arrests at concerts, and there's still arrests at music festivals for drug possession or selling, right?
I just have a hard time thinking that the same number of arrests would be happening if Phish's audience was reversed, black and white.
Almost certainly there would be, much more. It wouldn't be tolerated.
The enforcement at the doors, inside, it just would not look the same. And that, I just want to call attention to white privilege and call that out in the music scene. And a little plug for our colleague Stephanie Jones while we're on the subject of nightlife and harm reduction. Follow her on Twitter at MusicFanDPA. Her Safer Partying campaign is all about, keeping people safe at music festivals, acknowledging drug use happens, trying to provide harm reduction services, information for people just to know, take breaks and don't mix drugs that can kill you, and just basic information.
And it's what's really incredible. So when I was at SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, we did some of that work early on, just trying to. We had a project called Amplify, which I think still exists, which was working with musicians and artists. And Stephanie was always doing her really great work at DPA too. But I mean, both venues and music festivals wouldn't carry or distribute harm reduction information. Certainly, organizations like Dance Safe, who wanted to be there and offer harm reduction services and information, were always denied. And what's been really neat about Stephanie's work is you can see the impact that's kind of finally starting to happen with numerous festivals. I think particularly some of the EDM ones are starting to open up to providing harm reduction spaces and information, and Zendo or
just allowing Zendo.
Yes, allowing these folks to come in there and do what they do.
So, John, I want to ask you a little bit more of a generalized question. Given what you're doing at change.org and given the current climate that we're in with the current president and attorney general and, let's just call it what it is, this chaotic regime, what are some areas of concern for you? And I know that's probably not a short list because shit seems to happen every single day. But today, what's on your worry list right now?
Are we talking drug policy stuff or anything?
No, we're talking anything. There's no shortage of choices.
Well, honestly, my main thing, I think this guy's main thing, everything else, not that it's a distraction, but I think most things are less important to him than being able to drop bombs, and particularly use something like a nuclear weapon. I think that frightens the hell out of me, because I think at the end of the day that's like really fits in with his ego and his mentality. Is I want to be able to, I have so much power right now, which is clearly the thing that's so important to him. If I have the ability to drop a bomb and take hundreds of thousands or even 1 million lives or something, that to me I think is something he's really itchy to do and is sort of trying to pave the path toward accomplishing. So that's what probably scares me and freaks me out the most about this administration right now.
Yeah, I think just a little perspective, we're worried about drug policy reform in the United States, but, this clown keeps talking this way. There may not be a United States left. I guess it kind of makes it difficult to do drug policy reform work, especially in this day and age, because there's so much other stuff to care about. Mm-hmm. And, we're trying to get folks to pay attention to this. If you had to pitch someone in an elevator about why they should care about drug policy reform, what would you say to them? How would you tell them care about this?
Ultimately, I guess for me, it's just about thinking about some of the values, particularly that we have, I think, as Americans around things like freedom, and actually getting people to understand what that really means. What does freedom really mean? And the fact that we're putting human beings in cages over things. That's what I always try to pull people in towards. Like, we're really taking away what we value the most from people, which is their freedom. And we're doing it in a way that's expensive, that doesn't work, that hurts people's families, and destroys their lives. And if we can get people to understand that, and understand that there's alternatives that would actually work better, that's what I think we really need to have happen.
John, this has been a great conversation. I don't want to make a joke based on
Phish, nuclear war.
Yeah, I don't want to make a joke based on that's such a great answer, but having the freedom to talk about clemency, marijuana, Phish, just like all in the same 10-minute conversation. It's, drugs and stuff is all about connecting the dots for folks. There's a lot of different conversations where drugs and drug policy have a lot of overlap and intersections with a lot of things, and we're just really glad that you were able to take the time and talk to us about your project. Looking forward to hearing more about it.
I really appreciate it. Great to be here, and it's Nation of Second Chances, and we launch next week. So you go to nationofsecondchances.org, and you'll find at least 9 or 10 stories of President Obama's clemency recipients, and over the next year, I hope to profile about 100 of them.
Nice. Keep doing what you're doing, John.
Jon Perri at change.org. Thanks for joining us.
Stay classy.
Drugs and Stuff is brought to you by the Drug Policy Alliance. If you like what you hear on the podcast, do us a favor and rate the show on iTunes. Give it 5 stars and a nice review. Also, we love to hear from you. Tweet at us at drugsandstuffdpa, use the hashtag drugsandstuff, and check out our website drugpolicy.org to see the other work we do, sign up for our emails, and donate. Special thanks to our producer Katherine Heller and to the hardworking staff of the Drug Policy Alliance for all of their work. Thanks for listening.